welcome. My name is Krishna, Narayanaswamy. I'm a co-founder and CTO of Netskope. And in this session, I'm going to talk about the founding of Netskope and our journey. So the early start for Netskope was in 2012, when I would say the catalyst for the company was our CEO, Sanjay Berry. He got the four of us together. The picture that you see here are the four founders, Levin Cheng on the left, Sanjay Berry, our CEO, Ravi Aital, our chief architect, and the final one is myself, Krishna. So Sanjay was the one who kind of had the idea of the market shifting and the need for a new way of doing security. One of the important things about starting a company is to have a vision. So back in October of 2012, when we started the company, we had a vision. And the vision was to build an iconic independent security company that is noted for solving the toughest cybersecurity challenges. So it's always very important to have a vision and have a goal, and also to have the trust of your co-founders. Without that, any startup cannot be successful. And that's what we built back in October of 2012. Now, what is the problem that we went out to solve? So the observation that Sanjay had made was, when you look at a typical organization, so Netskope is a cloud security company, sells to enterprise organizations that have users that are using resources in enterprises like data and applications. So back in 2010, 10 years ago, if you looked at an enterprise, an organization had a very well-defined perimeter. So the perimeter was protected by firewalls, by secure web gateways, and so on, to protect the bad elements, the attackers and the malicious people from getting into the organization. Now, what we observed back in 2012 was organizations were starting to move away from this type of architecture. One of the biggest things that led to this change was the adoption of cloud applications. Back in 2012, the biggest applications out there were Salesforce, Google Suite, ServiceNow, and so on. And organizations were starting to adopt that instead of building their own applications. So which meant that as you moved to these cloud applications, your data was moving there. In addition, another important thing that also happened was the way that people work changed, right? So people were no longer working just in offices. People had laptops or had mobile devices, so they went back home, worked from home, or they were in public transportation like trains and worked from there, or coffee shops and so on, right? So that is another big change that happened. And then all these cloud applications allowed you to instantaneously share documents. So you can upload documents and share and collaborate with all your other co-workers, right? Now, what this did was it started moving sensitive data to the cloud. So again, this is a problem that we felt that existing security solutions were not solving in a proper way. And we felt that there was an opportunity to go in and disrupt the industry. So that is very important. When building a startup, you want to look for certain changes in the market that will allow you to disrupt the existing way of doing things. Now, with this in mind, we went out and talked to a bunch of venture capitalists in the Silicon Valley. And we were lucky within a month and a half to secure our first round of funding. Again, it's very important that you have a goal when you go in for your funding. The goal that we had was that we would come out with a product, a beta version of our product in 1 year. Basically, we set the goal of October of 2013 to have something out there. So with that in mind, we went and raised money. And once we raised money, we started building a team. And the initial team was very much focused towards engineering, because what we were building was a technical solution. And our CEO, Sanjay, was the only one talking to customers and getting feedback. So while we were building the product, it's also very important that the business side of the company goes in and finds out, what does the market require? Do we need to change things that we are building to meet the market requirements? So while the technical team was building the product, Sanjay, and then we had a first product management person who went out and met customers and started gathering the requirements and conveying that back to the engineering team. Now, all of this, as I said, we built our engineering team and started working on the version 1 of the product, and that came to fruition in October of 2013. So we kind of met our goal. By October of 2013, we came out of what is called coming out of stealth. Up until that time, people knew of a company called Netskope, but they did not know what we did. In August of 2013, we hired our first marketing team, and our marketing team worked with us to identify how to message the solution that we are building. This is very important because ultimately the market needs to understand what you're building. And so when we came out of stealth, one of the first things that we did is what you're seeing here. It's called a cloud report. A cloud report basically gives an idea of the trends that are happening in the industry. Basically, we came out with a cloud report that said that the top 10 cloud applications that were being used were these applications that you see on the screen. Now, this is a very good sales tool because this shows customers or potential customers that there is a problem that they have to solve. Now, to date, we have been continuously coming out with these cloud reports every quarter. So the latest one we came out in February of 2020 is what you're seeing here. So we continue to do that because it is definitely a very good sales tool. So always when you build a startup and you come out with a solution, look for ways in how you can message that. And for us, one of the effective tools of messaging was the cloud report, among other things. Now, what happened when we came out with the product? When we came out with the product and started talking to customers, the immediate reaction was, no, I don't have the problem, right? I'm all set. I don't need your solution. Because nobody wants to change things, right? So the next thing we had to do was, how do we figure out and explain to the customer they do indeed have a problem? So we embarked on another tool that we called a cloud risk assessment. We call it CRA. So what a cloud risk assessment does is we go into our customers and ask them, how many cloud applications do you have? And they usually come back and say that I have about 20 or 30 applications, right? Now, what we do is we say, can you give us all your internet-bound logs from your firewalls or secure web gateways? We will process it and come back with a report for you. So usually this was a free report that we did. In some cases, a paid report. But ultimately, when we took the data that the customer provided, we customized a report very specific to them. And when we did that, we found that only 5% of the applications that were being used in an organization were known to the IT security department. And that's why they came up with the number 20 or 30. The remaining were all what we call shadow IT. And that led to more conversations as to how do you start protecting your data going to these shadow IT applications. We also built another tool called a Cloud Confidence Index. We knew that all these applications are not created equal. So we gave different lenses through which the customer can identify that they really had a problem. And the buyer who's in your customer, in the case of Netskope, the buyer is generally what we call the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, can take this report to his higher ups who handle the budgets to secure funding. So it's very important that as you build a business, you understand who your buyer is, what your target market is, right? In our case, it was very, from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we were not targeting a particular vertical. This solution was not built for financial services or was not built for healthcare. The solution was built to span across all verticals. You will see as I go on with my talk why this is very important, right? So because we scan multiple verticals, we were able to go and talk to all the different organizations. Your target market becomes much larger, right? And so we were able to go and engage with all these different segments, verticals, and then talk to them. The good part was almost all these verticals, whether it's healthcare, financial services, were all adopting these cloud applications. So what I want to emphasize here is, as a startup, you will see resistance. and you will have to find innovative ways of how you deal with that resistance. So for us, when we look at our journey, we do see that at certain points in our journey, we did see upticks where we were seeing good results from building our customers. But at times, there were frustrating moments where some customers turned us down right away. So it's very important as you grow your company, even if you have these downfalls, it's okay. There's no reason to give up. Ultimately, think of this as not a sprint, but a marathon. A sprint gets done in the matter of tens of seconds, whereas a marathon gets done in the matter of hours. So it's very important that when there are these downfalls, you do realize there is some form of support from which you can bounce back. As long as you find that support, you bounce back and keep going. Now, at the end of it, when you come up 10,000 foot or 30,000 feet above the ground, the direction you see is always going up. It does not matter how many downs happen, but ultimately it's always going to the right. And that's very important as an entrepreneur. When you build a startup, you're bound to see this happening. Now, the next thing that is very important in building a startup is different things that you do to make this successful. So I'm going to talk about a few of them. So the first thing is also the obsession of customers, right? Always customers are number one. The reason being, there's only so much that you can do. The more satisfied customers you have, they become your apostles and they can go and sell the product for you. And we have seen this in our case, where we have some very loyal customers who have been, whom we could use as references and who have gone out of their way to promote our solution, right? And towards that end, one of the things that we did very early on is to engage with these customers as partners. We don't see them as selling something and walking away, but making sure that they see value from what they bought from Netskope. And that's very important as a startup, that when you sell your product, you want to make sure that your customers are seeing the value so that they can continue to use it and be your proponents with their peers. So that's very important. The other one is also to dream big and innovate and move fast. As a startup, you cannot afford to be stagnated. It's very difficult to predict the market. So as you engage with customers and recognize certain shifts, you want to move fast, right? And that's what I call pivoting or revectoring, which is very important in startups, right? And always invest in what is a key core competency. For us in the initial days, the core competency was our engineering team. So we invested big in the engineering team so that we can innovate. Also, when you build a team, as you grow the team, you want to make sure that you have a culture. We are very obsessed with our culture. We have a very open culture and we are very transparent, right? We have quarterly all hands meetings with all our employees. Encourage employees to come openly and talk to all the people, all the way up to the CEO, right? Very clearly state there's no politics, no bureaucracy. And it's always very important to do two things. One is to give back to community. We encourage our employees to go and work with any community related project and to spend time and give back to the community, and always to have fun, right? Work is hard, but all work and no play is not good. So always having some fun events, which are team events, which is very important, so that we build a family beyond just coming into work. And that's what we have done. And today, from 4 of us back in 2012, we are over 1,000 employees, and all our employees live by this culture. It's very important to build that in order to have a successful startup and a successful company, especially if you want to make it live for a long time. So that was the initial setup of Netskope, the founding days. I would say the first 2.5 to 3 years. One thing that I also want to emphasize, which is very important, is when you come out with a solution, you want to think broadly, you want to think for the future, and we did do that. So we knew that the solution that we came out with was not something that was going to be stagnant and that was going to grow. And that's something that I will come back and re-emphasize later on. So the next part of our journey is what I call turning points. There were certain moments that caused us to view the market in a different way. So let me touch upon a few of them. So one of them was this application called Office 365. Many of you listening to this presentation are very familiar probably with Office 365. I would say around 2015 was when it started emerging. And the way Microsoft put it is any organization, which is pretty much 90+% of all organizations in the world, used some form of Office tools. This could be Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or Exchange for email. Microsoft started steering them towards the cloud, right? They said that no longer are you going to deploy the Microsoft products on premises, you're going to consume it in the cloud. And that was the turning point for Netskope, because now all of a sudden, all the way from the CEO of our customers, they were aware of the investment they were making in moving their office-related productivity tools to the cloud. And when they do that, it was also very important for them to ensure that their data is secure. The reason being, there are two things which is very important when it comes to data. One is more and more regulations have started emerging in the market, like GDPR, almost all LGPD in Brazil, GDPR in Europe, almost all countries have some form of privacy regulation, which was becoming predominantly important for organizations to adhere to. The other one was also intellectual property. Any business, as a matter of its existence, has intellectual property, which needs to be protected. So all of a sudden, when all of this data that used to be housed in private data centers are being forced to move to the cloud, the question came, how do you secure that? So all of a sudden, now what happened was customers were coming to us, Netskope, looking for a solution. So the first few years, it was us trying to sell to the market that there was a problem and we had a solution. And so that's why I call this as a turning point. Another turning point was also the market analysts. Almost all, when you look at IT market, there are many analysts who follow the IT market. One that is very predominant is Gartner. Gartner works with all enterprise customers and guides them and counsels them on trends that are happening in the IT market. And specifically, they do look at the security vertical as well. So one of the turning points for Netskope was Gartner recognizing that there was a different market segment that would make sense from a security point of view for addressing the security of data going to cloud applications. They called it CASB, which stands for Cloud Access Security Broker. And one of the things that Gartner did 2 years after creating this market segment was come out with a tool called the Magic Quadrant, which you're seeing here. The Magic Quadrant is you can say a quantitative way of scoring the different vendors who are in this space. So over the years, as you can imagine, with any startup, if you had a bright idea, you can be rest assured there are at least 6 or 7 different people in the world who have similar ideas. So needless to say, Netskope had competition. There were other companies, either small or big, that also entered the space. And so when Gartner came out with the Magic Quadrant, it was very important for us as a startup to be positioned well in that Magic Quadrant. So we were very fortunate, and given all the work that we put in initially in building our solution, that Gartner automatically saw us as a leader in this market. And that was another turning point for us, because many of the prospective customers whom we were selling to saw the Gartner Magic Quadrant as a short way of shortlisting which vendors they needed to talk to. And they took pretty much the vendors who were in that right quadrant, right top quadrant, as the ones they would engage with. So again, rather than us going out and seeking customers, which we were continuing to do, these were changes that happened in the market that brought customers to us. So and depending on which segment you are, I'm sure there are similar such analysts or tools that you could leverage. And it's very important that you do leverage that. Now, another important thing also as a startup that you want to do is to create barriers to entry, right? As I said, over the years, 6 or 7 different startups started building similar solutions. So how do you stand above the noise, right? So at Netskope, we came up with an innovative way in which we would provide security, right? We called it Cloud XD. It's good to market it because always those marketing terms tend to stick with customers. But also what is important is make sure that you continue to innovate and keep the barrier high. And in most countries throughout the world, another way to protect your intellectual property is to file for patents. So at Netskope, we were very bullish and we were very aggressive in terms of protecting our intellectual property. So we went ahead and filed patents for it throughout various jurisdictions in the world. Wherever you feel that you will be selling this product and you could potentially see competition, I would highly encourage that you protect your intellectual property, which is what we at Netskope did. But it is very important that you do identify your differentiation, because many times when you talk to customers and when they see 3 or 4 different vendors all speaking similar language, you want to be able to articulate why your solution is different and why it makes more sense for the customer to go with your solution. The next thing that is also important, which I kind of alluded early on, is you do not want to be restricted in your solution to solving a single problem. So over the years, we were lucky to gain more traction in the market, also attract more investment. So we were able to invest into our solution. So what we did at Netskope over the years was to actively expand our product into a platform with multiple different products on top of the platform. Rather than being a one product company, we became a platform company with multiple products that customers could use. So this gives us 2 opportunities. One is customers are always looking for consolidation. So as I said, as a startup or as an early market entrant, people are okay with niche products to solve certain solutions, certain problems. But as the market matures, they want to consolidate their tools. They do not want to have multiple tools. The sprawl of having multiple tools is not an easy one to manage, needs more overhead, more workers, and so on, right? So we were fully aware of that. And that's why early on, I mentioned an important thing is make sure that you have a broader foundation in the beginning so that you can always add to it, right? So over time, Netskope has added multiple solutions to our platform. And some of this has been organically grown. So we built it ourselves. At times where we found it made sense, we even made some acquisitions. But when we made acquisitions, it is very important that we assimilate that acquisition into the platform. We did not sell the acquiring company's product as a separate product. And that is also very important because that pays its dividend later on. Initially, you may not be able to see the dividend because you're spending some resources to acquire the company, and you may want to see the dividends right away. But over time, as I said, the sprawl of different tools is what causes headaches, and customers are really looking for consolidation. So that is another thing that we did over time. We expanded it into a platform. We put some very important investments which differentiated us, like New Edge, which happened to be our delivery network, service delivery network, which is also a differentiator for Netskope compared to some of the competition. So it's very important, again, to have a broader platform play. Another important thing also to keep in mind is your business model, which I did not mention earlier. The business model for Netskope is a subscription model, right? With a subscription model, you need to renew your subscription on a yearly basis. Now, when you build a platform, it also gives you an opportunity to upsell. So your existing customer may buy one module to start with, and if they see value, and if you show them adjacent modules that you have built on the platform, it gives you an opportunity to upsell to your existing customers. And we have seen that happen, and we're very fortunate that we had this vision of building this platform, and we are now leveraging that. Another thing which is also important in your journey is when you build a product platform, it is not going to stand in isolation, right? Especially if you're selling in the IT space, in the information technology space, right? Uh, there are a lot of ecosystem players that your customers would have. So it's very important to have an open ecosystem partnership, which is what we embraced. So we found a lot of adjacent areas which we felt were not the core competency. Obviously, everything looks attractive and you want to build, but as a startup, you need to know what you want to focus on, what are your core competencies, and what you don't want to build, because you will be distracted from time to time. Your strongest supporters will tell you, hey, why don't you build this or why don't you build that, right? You got to be very clear about what your core competencies are and where you want to invest. And wherever it makes sense, where your customers need a broader solution, that can be solved by partnerships. And that's what we built at Netskope. We have a very broad partnership portfolio across various different adjacencies. So again, another important thing to keep in mind. So that's how these were the turning points and how the company evolved over time. So now I want to come to my concluding section, which is where Netskope is today. As you know, we are in very difficult times. We are going through very difficult times throughout the world. Starting February, March of this year, most of us have been working, have been sheltering in place and working from home, working remotely. And what we have found at Netskope, because we protect customers' data going outside the organization to cloud, to web, to the applications, we have found a jump in remote work. Prior to the COVID pandemic, we saw about 25 to 27% of users working remote. But now it's more than 2/3 of the organization's users are all working remote, right? Now, what does this mean? What this means is, from a security point of view, there's more risk, right? When you're sitting in an office, you have a lot of protection around you. There are a lot of investments made. All organizations have made investments in protecting, to making sure that it protects its assets when it is inside the well-confined location of their offices. Now, when you start working from home, right, the risk increases, right? Initially, like even going direct to internet, the risk increased. So there were some solutions that were put in place. Then people started adopting cloud, which is when Netskope came into being. And that, while that increased the risk, Netskope helped address that. Now, remote work is taking this to a different plane, right? Now, people are no longer in your protected network. People are working from home. They still have your data. So that data can escape out anywhere unless you put some checks and balances. And that's where Netskope comes in. So with our architecture of being able to govern and provide visibility for data that is either going direct to internet, to the cloud, or from remote offices, right? We reduce that risk a great level. And we are basically reaping the benefits of this solution, especially at a time like today, where almost 2/3 of the workforce is working remote. We are seeing more and more organizations reaching out to us, looking for a solution to address their security concerns for remote workers. And again, to touch back on an earlier point that I made, when we built a solution, it was not targeted towards a particular vertical. We cut across verticals. It is true that some verticals that Netskope addresses is going through a downturn, like travel, hospitality. These industries are going through a downturn. But then at the same time, some of the other verticals like financials, retail, some of the essential retail, healthcare, and so on, are seeing an uptick in terms of users using the cloud and the internet. So we are definitely riding that wave and seeing wide adoption for the solution. So again, very important that you account for such downturns that could potentially happen and make sure that your solution is future-proof in order to be successful. I want to end by telling that we continue our journey. So over time, as I said, we have been adding more and more modules to our platform, and we do have a vision. It's very important that at any time when you go and talk to customers, you have a vision. It does not stop today. You need to know what you're going to build next year, 18 months from now. So always very important. And over time, hopefully you're addressing the right market space and your platform becomes much more critical need for your customers, right? So our journey at Netskope will continue beyond the COVID virus, beyond 2020, 2021. And I hope you will follow us. We are very active in all the social channels. We are in LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as Twitter. So please do follow our journey. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much.